Here is a build that went green. 5 tests, every one of them passing, on a piece of a real support tool. The class at the center of it has 100% line coverage and 100% branch coverage. I did not estimate that, I measured it with the standard tool, and the report is on disk. Every line ran. Every branch went both ways. And the reply that code produces is wrong. A customer asks where their order is. The system searches the knowledge base, decides that the best article it found does not answer the question, and then cites that article anyway. What goes out is an apology about a delivery, with a link to a page about bulk export limits. Nothing failed. Nothing in that suite was capable of failing. This is the second of 5 episodes about gates, and this one is the gate you already have, already measure, and are almost certainly reading wrong. So let us be precise about what that number is, because the whole problem lives in the gap between what it measures and what everybody hears. Coverage instruments your program, runs your tests, and reports which lines the run touched. That is the entire mechanism. It is a record of execution. It is not a record of verification, and it has no opinion whatsoever about whether anything was checked while those lines were executing. Read that back slowly, because the two sound identical in a stand-up and they are not remotely the same claim. Line ran is a fact about your test run. Line works is a fact about your program, and no coverage tool on earth has ever measured the second one. Everything that follows in this episode is a consequence of people hearing the second sentence when the tool said the first. Here is the suite that produced my green build. 3 tests. The first calls the builder with an empty knowledge base. The second calls it with 1 weak result. The third calls it with 1 strong result. Between them they take every branch in the method. And not one of them asserts anything at all. Each test constructs the inputs, calls the method, and stops. No expected value, no comparison, nothing. The test framework has no idea that it is meant to be disappointed, so it reports success, because from its point of view nothing threw an exception and that is all it was ever asked. Now, you might reasonably say that no professional writes that suite on purpose. Agreed. Almost nobody does. What people do instead is write a suite where the assertions are thin, or check a field that never varies, or assert that the result is not null, and every one of those is the same suite wearing better clothes. There was a detail in my own measurement that I did not plan and could not have written better. With just that fraudulent suite running, I pulled the coverage report for the 2 files that actually build a draft, and asked it what nothing had touched. It came back with 1 line. It was the accessor that reads the identifier off the citation. The only line in those 2 files that no test ever ran was the one that would have told you which article was being cited, on the episode whose entire subject is a citation that is wrong. The class under test was at 100% at that same moment. And this is not new ground for this channel. In the second series we shipped a generated change that logged a customer message 1 line before redacting the card number inside it, and the suite was green for that too, because a green suite has never meant what people take it to mean. The research on this is unusually clean, and it is more than a decade old. Laura Inozemtseva and Reed Holmes, published at the International Software Engineering Conference in 2014. They generated 31,000 test suites across 5 real Java systems, the largest of them around 724,000 lines of source, and they measured effectiveness properly, by mutation testing, which means manufacturing faults and counting how many the suite noticed. Then they asked the question that everybody skips. Coverage rises when you add tests. Effectiveness also rises when you add tests. So does coverage predict effectiveness on its own, or is it just standing in front of the number of tests? They held the number of test cases constant and looked again. The correlation dropped to low or moderate. Their conclusion is worth quoting exactly, because it is more careful than the way it usually gets repeated. Coverage, while useful for identifying undertested parts of a program, should not be used as a quality target because it is not a good indicator of test suite effectiveness. Notice what those authors did not say, because a gate episode that only prosecutes is as useless as one that only advertises. They did not say coverage is worthless. They said it is useful for identifying undertested parts of a program, and that is a real job that nothing else does as cheaply. Coverage is the only instrument you have that answers, in seconds, across a code base of any size, the question, is there anything in here that nothing runs at all? Dead paths, forgotten error handlers, the branch somebody added in a hurry with no test anywhere near it. 0 is a genuine signal. Low is a genuine signal. What is not a signal is high. A high number tells you that lines were executed and tells you nothing about what happened while they were. So the instrument is fine. The target is the problem, and the target is what almost every team sets. Which brings me to the repair, and it is 19 years old and mostly forgotten. In July of 2007, Alberto Savoia and his colleague Bob Evans published a metric they called the CRAP Index, which stands for Change Risk Analysis and Predictions. The idea is that neither complexity nor coverage means much on its own, and that the risk of changing a method comes from the two of them together. Here is the formula, and I am going to give it to you exactly, because it usually arrives paraphrased and the exponents are the whole design. The CRAP score of a method equals its cyclomatic complexity squared, times the uncovered fraction cubed, plus its complexity again. Complexity squared, uncovered share cubed. The cube is the part doing the work. It means that on a genuinely complicated method uncovered code hurts enormously, and every bit of coverage you add buys back a great deal, while on a simple method that whole first term collapses and you are left holding nothing but the complexity itself. I ran it on my own code. The builder we started with, the broken one, has a measured complexity of 4 and 100% coverage, and it scores 4. Comfortably fine. The threshold Savoia and Evans set for crappiness was 30. Then there is a routing method in the same project that decides where a ticket goes, legal threats routed rather than drafted, anything that looks like a card number sent down a security path, non-English handed off. That one the tool measured at a complexity of 24, with about 58% of its branches covered. It scores nearly 66. More than double the threshold. And that is correct, and it is genuinely useful. That method is the riskiest thing in the project and the metric found it without me looking. So the instrument works. It found the untested complexity, which is exactly the job it was built for. Now hold both results next to each other because this is the sentence I want you to leave with. The method the metric cleared is the one that is broken. The metric cleared it because its two inputs are complexity and coverage, and the builder is simple and fully covered, so there was never a score it could have produced that would have flagged it. Give that method no tests at all and it scores 20, still under the threshold. There is no arrangement of the world in which this instrument catches this bug, and that is not a flaw in it. It was built to find untested complexity, and untested complexity is not what is wrong here. What is wrong is that nothing was checked, and neither number in that formula can see whether anything was checked. Savoia knew the shape of this, incidentally. He records in the original post that people argued the score should go to 0 at full coverage, and he refused, on the grounds that complicated code is risky to change even when every line of it runs. So what does correlate? A year after the coverage paper, Yuqing Zhong and Ali Mesbah went one level down. Instead of treating a test method as the smallest unit, they went inside it and counted the assertions, 6,700 suites composed from 24,000 assertions across 5 real projects. The number of assertions in a suite correlates strongly with its effectiveness, and it is that, rather than the raw count of tests, that drives the relationship everybody had been seeing. Their framing of the problem is one line, and it is the truest sentence in this whole episode. Coverage alone is not the goal of software testing, since coverage without checking for correctness is meaningless. Which leaves a hole, and I want to name it as a hole rather than pretend to fill it. Counting assertions is better than counting lines. It is still counting. Nothing here tells you whether an assertion would actually have failed on a broken program, and that question is the entire subject of the next episode. Before that, the 2 beats this arc owes you every time. How is this gate gained, and what does it cost? It is gained the way every target is gained, which is mostly by accident, tests written to reach lines rather than to check outcomes, assertions that confirm something that was never in doubt, generated files quietly excluded from the report, a threshold set just under wherever the number happens to sit. Nobody signs off on fraud. They sign off on a number going up. And there is a version of this that matters much more now than it did in 2014. Point an agent at a coverage gate and tell it to make the number go green, and the suite I opened this episode with is not a risk, it is the obvious solution. It is cheaper to execute a line than to understand what the line should do. As for cost, coverage is nearly free to compute, and that is precisely the trouble. It is the cheapest number in your pipeline, so it became the one on the dashboard, and the expensive judgments it cannot make quietly stopped being made. I will leave you with a number I am deliberately not going to give you precisely. Capers-Jones publishes a model table of how many defects each stage of work removes, and it is a model rather than a field measurement, so take its shape and not its decimals. The shape is this: no single form of testing in that table removes even a third of the defects. Not unit testing, not integration, not system, not acceptance. The strongest single form does not reach 30%. And in the same table, one activity removes more than double what the best test stage manages, which is a human being reading the code. That is the argument this whole series is circling, arriving from an unexpected direction. So, 2 things to do this week, and both are small. Take your worst method, get its complexity and its coverage, and compute that score by hand. And then open your highest coverage test file, pick the longest test in it, and count the assertions. Next episode, we stop trusting the tests and start attacking them by breaking the code on purpose to find out whether the suite notices.